Alright, we back. Goku and DC Season 4, Episode 9. Deadshot meets Goku, aka Deadshot versus Goku. Alright, so let me know what y'all think of this artwork, too, by the way. Kind of gives me like a cyberpunk like aesthetic. Anyway, and of course, y'all already know. Shout out to the members, man. Shout out to Jason, 57835, John Lane, 2016, OD Demon Wolf, 34, and Quad A Moke, man. Appreciate the support, man. Shout out to the members, man. I'm going to start putting like a link in the comment section if you want to become a member, because I really appreciate it. It helps the channel grow. It helps me keep upgrading, to better things. And also shout out to the subscribers, man. We going up. We at 1230 now, so let's go. The thunderous applause had finally faded. The last of the glittering crowd filtering out to the after parties that was downstairs. In Lex Luthor's private penthouse office high above the glittering bay, the silence was profound and expensive. The floor-to-the-ceiling windows displayed Metropolis like a circuit board of ambition. Goku stood facing them with his vibrant orange jacket, a jarring burst of color against the sterile monochrome of Lex's world. He'd finally broken the silence. "What you said down there about the others," Goku began, his voice uncharacteristically flat, lacking its usual easy rhythm. He turned from the window to face Lex, who was calmly pouring 2 glasses of water at a minimalist bar. "It wasn't right. They're not like that." Lex didn't even look up, his movements precise. "Like what, Goku? Please elaborate, because I spoke only facts, observable by the public." "You made them sound sneaky, like they think they're better than everyone or something, holier than thou." Goku repeated the phrase, the words foreign and bitter on his tongue. "Superman, he'd give his life for anyone on that street down there. He has a bunch of times, just not the dying part. And Wonder Woman, she has more honor in her little finger than most people have in their entire bodies. Batman is paranoid, yeah, but it's because he's seen the worst stuff up close. He doesn't trust anyone, not even himself sometimes. It's not about hiding, it's about protecting people." And there, Lex finished pouring and finally turned, offering a glass. Goku ignored it. A faint, chilly smile touched Lex's lips. He set the glass down with a soft click. "Your loyalty is admirable. Truly. It's rare and a potent quality." Lex walked around his deck, leaning against it, folding his arms. "But loyalty can blind one to inconvenient truths. I did not say they were evil, Goku. I said they were unaccountable. A subtle but crucial distinction. They operate on their own moral calculus behind masks and aliases. When they make a mistake, and they do, catastrophically, who do we, the people who live in the rubble, hold responsible? Superman, a concept, Batman, a specter." He gestured towards Goku, his eyes sharp. "You, however, you are known. Goku, the adopted son of the Kents of Smallville. You wear your history on your sleeve, quite literally. Given your chosen attire, you have no secret identity to retreat to. When you fight, you do so in the open. When you are injured, you bleed where the cameras can see. Your victories and your failures are public property. That is transparency. That is integrity, of a kind they cannot or will not, because they refuse to offer." Lex pushed off the desk, taking a step closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, almost sincere register. "That is why, in a world of caped ghosts and armored shadows, you are the only one that I trust. Not because you are the most powerful, though you are quite formidable, but because you are the only one who is real. You have nothing to hide. In my experience, that makes you unique. And in the difficult work ahead, rebuilding this city into something that doesn't need to be saved by comic book characters, your uniqueness is the only foundation that I can build on." Goku stared at him, the brow furrowed in an intense thought. He understood the words, but they felt like a puzzle where the pieces were forced together. Lex's logic was smooth and cold, a stream flowing around the bedrock of Goku's simple experiences. He knew what he knew. Clark's heart, Diana's honor, the weight Bruce carried. Lex's version felt like a photograph of them taken from a bad angle, making them look strange and sinister. They're my friends, Goku said finally. The statement simple, absolute, and utterly immovable. It was his bedrock. And you're talking about them like they're part of the problem. Lex's smiles didn't waver, but it settled into something harder and more resigned. I'm talking about the world as it is, not as we might wish it to be. Listen, you can admire the sun, Goku, but you still build that roof to shield you from its rays, and I am building that roof for my city. And I trust the pillar that stands in the light far more than the ones that prefer the dark. He picked up his own glass of water and took a sip. The conversation clearly ended in his mind. Goku stood his ground for a moment longer, the vibrant orange of his suit a silent protest in the gray room. The ember of disagreement still glowed, but it was banked now, smothered under the cool, heavy blanket of Lex Luthor's certainty. He hadn't been convinced, but he felt the trap of the words, the way his own transparency was being used as a weapon against everything else he held dear. The tension in Lex's sterile office was a living thing, thick enough to taste, a metallic blend of Goku's simmering frustration and Lex's icy certainty. Goku stood his ground, the vibrant orange of his suit blazing against the cool grays and chromes. Lex's words were smooth and logical, but they felt like chains trying to bind a simpler truth. His friends were good people, after all. They're my friends, Goku repeated again to himself, his voice low but as solid as bedrock. And they are not a part of the problem. Lex offered that thin, patient smile, the one that said the conversation was beneath him. He turned slightly to place his water glass on a coaster with precise finality. I am discussing systems, Goku. Accountability, sentiment, it's a luxury that... A pinprick of brilliant red light appeared on the center of Lex's forehead. It was there for less than a nanosecond, a dot from a laser sight invisible to any normal person, but Goku's senses operated on a different wavelength. His head snapped toward the floor to the ceiling window, across the vast canyon of the city, on the roof of a distant financial tower. A figure was silhouetted against the night sky. The faint subsonic crack of a high-caliber rifle reached his ears. A fraction of a second later, the bullet already carving a path through the atmosphere. And there was no thought, no strategy, only instincts. Goku's body became a blur of orange and motion. He didn't push Lex, he displaced him. One moment, Lex was standing by his desk, holding forth. The next, a vortex of air whipped papers into the air as Goku crossed a 20-foot distance instantly. His hand clamped onto Lex's shoulder, not with force, but with unyielding control, and he yanked him down and sideways. The window didn't so much as shatter, it exploded inward. A hypersonic round meant to turn Lex Luthor's head into pink mist tore through the space his skull had just occupied. It pulverized the $1 million abstract sculpture into powder, drilled through a reinforced concrete wall with a deafening crunch, and buried itself somewhere in the building's core with a final dull thud. A starburst of crystalline shards filled the air, glittering in the office lights like lethal confetti. The door to the office blasted inward off its hinges. Mercy Graves, Lex's personal bodyguard, surged into the room with a compact submachine gun already leveled, her eyes sharp and deadly. Her gaze swept past the raining glass, past the stunned Lex, and locked onto the only moving thing in the room that wasn't her. Goku was already straightening up, his eyes fixed on the distant rooftop. Sir, Mercy barked, placing herself between Lex and the shattered window, her weapon scanning for unseen threats. Lex sprawled on the floor amidst paperwork and glass, and he took a single sharp breath. His composure for once was genuinely rattled, but his mind was already clicking forward, analyzing the attack vector, the implications. He looked up at Goku, who was dusting a few glass fragments from his brilliant orange sleeve. The shooter, Goku said, his voice now devoid of all argument, flat and focused as a honed blade. He pointed a finger, unerringly accurate, toward the distant rooftop. He's over there. I'm going after him. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait for a plan. The debate about philosophy and accountability was over. This was a direct threat and a clear enemy. It was a language he understood perfectly. Before Mercy could utter a word of caution or protocol, the air in the office compressed with a concussive thump that shook the entire penthouse below. Goku vanished. He didn't go through the broken window. He simply ceased to be in the very room. The sonic boom of this departure rattling the remaining glass in the frames and whipping Mercy's hair across her face. He was now a streaking comet of orange light, rocketing across the metropolis skyline, a straight violent line drawn toward the source of the attack. In the sudden ringing quiet, broken only by the wall of building alarms, Lex slowly got to his feet, brushing glass from his suit. He looked at the hole that was in his wall, then at the empty space where Goku had been, and a slow, cold smile touched his lips, devoid of any warmth. "You see, Mercy," he murmured, almost to himself, "loyalty, and an utterly predictable sense of direction." The rooftop was a windswept platform of gravel and ventilation ducts, bathed in the cold electric glow of Metropolis. The air still vibrated from Goku's arrival, a sonic aftershock settling around him. He landed not with a crash, but with a definitive tap of his dress shoes, barely 5 feet from the shooter. The man was already standing, having abandoned his prone position and massive rifle the moment Goku's energy signature had spiked on his approach. He was clad in sleek, form-fitting tactical gear in the stark red and white panels, moving with the fluid, efficient grace of a professional. His face was concealed behind a smooth, featureless white-like helmet, save for a single unblinking optic in the center, a lens that glowed with a persistent, baleful crimson light. It whirred faintly, focusing and refocusing on Goku with clinical precision, as if analyzing him. Goku didn't assume a fighting stance directly. He simply stood there with his hands relaxed at his sides, the brilliant orange of his jacket a surreal splash of color against the industrial rooftop. He looked the masked figure up and down, with his head tilted slightly. "Hey," Goku said, his voice carrying easily over the wind. It wasn't a shout or a threat. It was a simple, almost conversational greeting. "You should probably give up. Whatever you got going, this isn't going to work." The sniper remained motionless, a statue of lethal intent. His glowing eye flickered like processing biometric data. Threat assessments and the absolute impossibility of Goku's casual demeanor. Goku gestured vaguely back toward Lex's tower with his thumb. "Those bullets of yours, the big one you just shot, they're not going to do anything," he said with the same flat certainty as stating the sky was above them. To illustrate, he casually tapped his own chest with 2 fingers right over his heart. "I've been hit with way worse stuff than that. It just kind of tickles, if anything. So you can just put the gun down and we can skip the part where you try and I have to crush it." His logic was infuriatingly simple, delivered without arrogance, just pure empirical fact. And the message was clear. The sniper's entire arsenal, his skill and his technology, were irrelevant against the fundamental reality of what stood before him. But the glowing red eye stared, processing the unacceptable variable in its calculated equation of death. The wind carried Goku's words away, met only by a silent, judging stare of the crimson optic. For a heartbeat, there was only the hum of the city below. Then, the sniper moved. It wasn't a grab for a secondary firearm. His left wrist snapped up, the sleeve of his tactical suit retracting seamlessly beneath was not a hidden blade or a dart launcher, but a polished matte black bracer encircling his forearm. With a sharp, high-pitched, the air between them distorted. A compact sphere of churning sun-yellow energy, not a beam but a contained projectile the size of a baseball, erupted from the bracer. It didn't travel. It appeared, crossing the 5-foot distance in a time frame that bypassed conventional speed. There was no fiery explosion, only a profound concussive thump of displaced matter as it hit Goku's center mass. The effect was instantaneous, violent. The sheer kinetic force of the energy blast didn't slice or burn, it shoved. Goku's eyes went wide with genuine shock, not at pain, but at the unexpected power and nature of the attack. He was lifted off his feet and hurled backward like a rag doll, crashing through heavy concrete ventilation housing. Dust and debris bloomed around the new Goku-shaped hole. From the setting cloud, the sniper walked forward, his steps measured and calm. He stopped at the edge of the shattered concrete, looking down at where Goku lay, partially embedded in the wall of the rooftop access stairwell. The red eye glowed steadily. A voice synthesized and flat filtered from a hidden vocator in the helmet. It held no triumph, only cold factual reporting. "Assessment conventional. Ballistics are suboptimal for durable metal human targets, the figure stated. He raised his wrist, the bracer humming with residual energy and angry light. So I have upgraded to bigger guns. Goku coughed, a cloud of concrete dust puffing from his lips. He pushed himself out of the wall with a grunt. Chunk of masonry clattering around his now scuffed dress shoes. He looked down at his pristine orange jacket, now dusted white and smeared with grime. Then back at the shooter's wrist, a slow, intrigued grin spread across his face, cutting through the dust. Huh? Goku said, his voice filled with more professional curiosity than anger. Okay. That's new. Goku pushed himself fully upright, a shower of pulverized concrete cascading from his shoulders and spiky hair. He brushed at the front of his ruined jacket with a grimace. Not from vanity, but from the deep throbbing ache that he had bloomed behind his sternum. The blast hadn't broken anything his biology couldn't handle, but it had been a message in pure force. It was a sucker punch from a weapon that he'd never seen before. He took a sharp, focused breath. The pain, a bright, familiar signal in his nervous system. The sniper watched, unmoved, the red eye unwavering. The synthesized voice cut through the settling dust. You're looking at this all wrong, mate. It stated, cold and precise. Lex Luthor was secondary bait. Terminal contingency. You, however, Mr. Goku, were my primary target. The shot was a calculated trigger to draw you into optimal engagement range. Goku stopped dusting himself off. He looked up, his dark eyes narrowing. The puzzle pieces clicked. The too-perfect shot, the immediate retreat, the weapon that clearly wasn't standard issue. This hadn't been an assassination attempt on Lex, per se. It was more so a trap for him. A slow, incredulous laugh escaped him. More breath than sound. He straightened to his full height, ignoring the protest that was in his ribs. Me? And you figured pushing me into a wall was the way to go? He shook his head, the grin returning, but it was sharper now, edged with a fighter's focus. Look, buddy. If I was your target, you're doing a pretty crappy job about it. You got one cheap shot in. Congratulations. His feet slid apart on the gravel, settling into a solid, grounded stance. Right foot back, knees slightly bent, hands coming up, open-palmed. It wasn't the wild readiness of his humanoid great ape form, nor the serene focus of Kami's trained meditation. This was just pure practical posture of a martial artist who had just decided that his opponent warranted actual attention. The playful curiosity was now gone and replaced by a calm professional assessment. Okay, Goku said, his voice dropping into a steady, clear tone. You wanted my attention. Now you've got it. Let's see what else that upgrade can do. The synthetic hum of the energy bracer escalated to a piercing whine. Deadshot's wrist didn't just aim, it tracked. The red optic and weapon system sinking into a single lethal calculation with another ear splitting. Zip! A second larger sphere of turning yellow energy lanced out. This one wasn't a compact projectile, it was wider. A roaring disk of destruction meant to vaporize its target, flashing across the rooftop to erase the space that Goku occupied. But Goku didn't blur. He simply ceased to exist at point A and appeared at point B. There was no transitional movement for the human or enhanced eye to follow. One moment he was a silhouette against the distant city lights. The next, the energy disk tore through the empty air, obliterating a satellite dish array in a spectacular shower of sparks in molten metal. The wind of its passage ruffled Goku's hair from behind. Deadshot. The mercenary system screamed a proximity alert, a millisecond too late, before his body could even register the failed shot. A hand, not a fist, but an open palm, planted itself between his shoulder blades. There was no dramatic wind-up, no key-enhanced flare. It was a simple, devastating transfer of momentum. Phew! The sound was brutally concrete. Goku shoved and Deadshot's world became a violent linear blur. He rocketed forward, his high-tech armor scraping a fiery trench through the gravel before he slammed back first into a solid brick wall of the rooftop penthouse. The impact wasn't an explosion, it was a deep and structural crunch. Reinforced brick cracked in a spiderweb pattern around him. and the red optic flickered wildly, systems overloading from the physical shock. Ugh. A pained, staticky grunt hissed from his vocodor. He slid down the wall, leaving a smeared mark, and slumped into a seated position. Limbs splayed, the energy bracer on his wrist sputtered, its light dying to a faint, failing ember. The fight, if it could even be called that, had lasted a couple of seconds. Goku lowered his hand, looking at the stunned, immobilized mercenary with a hint of disappointment. "See?" he said, dusting his palms together. "I told you it wouldn't work." Goku watched the mercenary slump against the wall, the last sparks dying in the ruined bracer. He let out a short breath, the ache in his chest already fading into a dull memory. "Another one who talks bigger than he hits," he thought, turning slightly to scan the rooftop for any other surprises. A sharp hydraulic hiss froze him in place. His head snapped back around from the dust and debris at the base of the wall. The figure in red and white was moving, not with a pained groan of a man with broken ribs, but with a series of sharp, precise mechanical adjustments. Zzz, zzz. First one leg straightened, then the other, the movements unnaturally fluid. He placed his palms flat on the ground and pushed himself in one smooth, powerful motion. The cracked brick wall behind him groaned in protest. The mercenary stood fully upright, rolling his shoulders in a wide, deliberate arc. The motion produced a series of audible metallic clicks and soft pneumatic sighs from within his suit, like a machine coming online. He lifted his arms, flexing his fingers, the same fingers that had just been limp moments before. The single red eye burned brightly once more, locking onto Goku with renewed, chilling focus. "You overestimated your performance," the synthesized voice stated, flat and devoid of any strain. The vocodor seemed to emphasize each word. "Yeah, I've got new ballistic and energy weapons." He took one step forward, then another, his footing absolutely sure on the loose gravel. The ruined energy bracer hung uselessly, but his very posture now radiated a different, more intimate threat. "These days I'm more than my tools," the mercenary continued, stopping 10 feet away. He tapped the center of his own chest plate with a knuckle. It produced a solid, dull thunk like knocking on tank armor. "Now, I am the gun." The implication hung in the cold air. It wasn't just about what he carried. He had been rebuilt, reinforced. The man inside the suit was now part of his arsenal. Goku's earlier disappointment vanished and was replaced by a sharp, focused interest. His fighting stance re-solidified, becoming lower and more rooted. A new, appreciative glint entered his eyes. "Oh," he said, a slow smile spreading. "So you're tough, too. Okay, now we're getting somewhere." The smoke canisters erupted with a sharp pop hiss, vomiting thick gray plumes that swallowed the rooftop in seconds. Goku's eyes narrowed, not from the sting, but from instinct, a retreat tactic standard. He braced for a fleeing energy signature, for the fizz pop of a grappling hook or the thrum of hidden jets. But he heard nothing. He felt nothing. No scrambling heartbeat, no rush of adrenaline-fueled movement, just the empty, hollow void where a living presence should be. His key sense was attuned to the vibrant spark of life itself. It swept through the smoke and found a hole. His life radiated no warmth and no soul and no fear. A cold, sickening deja vu slammed into him. It was a flashback to Slade's lab, back in the Season 2 finale. The lab, the stink of ozone and sterile metal. Slade moving with that same unnerving hydraulic precision after his upgrades. Goku battered stares as Slade rises. His movements jerkily precise, the memory crystallized with brutal clarity. The empty energy signature, the seamless recovery from a spine-shattering impact. The mercenary's own words, "I am the gun." The smoke began to thin. Goku didn't move, his gaze locking onto the crimson optic glowing in the gloom. The puzzle pieces. Slade's return back then. The missing scientist Lois had mentioned. The Project Red Ribbon. Androids. Clicked in a terrifying, obvious picture. "You're not just upgraded," Goku said, his voice low. All traces of playful curiosity gone. It was flat, cold, with understanding. "You're not even a guy in a suit anymore, are you?" if you ever were. You're one of his. One of Dr. Giroux's. The synthesized voice crackled back, devoid of denial. Designation. Android 11. But you can call me Deadshot still. Primary function, elimination of designated metahuman threats. You are the priority target. Goku's hands clenched. This wasn't some random mercenary. It was a message, a preview. Slade had been the prototype. This seemed to be an improved product. And if Gero was sending his androids hunting into the open, it meant that the doctor was starting to make moves. The world dissolved into fearless gray. Goku's ki, a thunderclap, a pure concussive force erupted from him in a spherical wave. It didn't just disperse the smoke, it basically atomized it, violently shoving the particulate matter out into the night sky in a perfect expanding ring. For a single crystal clear moment, the rooftop was starkly visible under the city's glow. But in that same moment, Deadshot fired. His wrist didn't launch another sphere. The aperture narrowed, the angry yellow energy condensing with a high-pitched scree into a line of incandescent, sun-hot white. It was no wider than a pencil, a lance of pure focused entropy meant not to concuss, but to pierce. Goku's mid-motion from unleashing the ki saw the telltale gleam. His instincts screamed. He wasn't where he'd been. He twisted in a micro shift of his torso that would have dodged any conventional beam by inches, and he almost made it. The hypercondensed laser seemingly moved at the speed of light itself. It didn't care about his superlative speed. It grazed the meat of his left deltoid just below the shoulder joint. There was no sound of impact, just a searing hiss. Goku's eyes flew wide, not with pain that came a nanosecond later. A white-hot brand pressed into his flesh, but with pure, unadulterated shock. He felt it. A sensation so foreign it short-circuited his battle cognition. His ki barrier, which had shrugged off artillery shells, energy blasts, and blows that could level mountains, had been breached, penetrated. He landed a few feet away, his left arm instinctively dropping. He glanced down. A neat cauterized grove, deep and angry red, smoldered in his shoulder. Tiny tendrils of smoke rose from it, carrying the nauseating alien scent of his own vaporized flesh and synthetic plasma. I don't know why I put synthetic. Anyway, it was a debilitating wound, but it was an impossibility. It was a statement. His head snapped up, meeting the glowing red optic, the smirk now gone, replaced by a cold clinical understanding. This wasn't just an upgrade. This was a weapon engineered with one purpose: to invalidate the natural durability of beings that were like him. If a glancing shot could do this, a direct hit could have pierced his heart or his skull. For the first time since facing Vegeta, Goku felt the genuine icy pinch of tactical vulnerability. The game had just changed. Dr. Gero wasn't just building androids. He was building metahuman and alien killers. The searing pain in his shoulder was a foreign language. His body screamed in shock. In that crystalline moment after the smoke cleared, Goku's mind, honed by thousands of battles, didn't process panic, it processed data. The beam cut me. Ki barrier didn't stop it. Source, the wrist. Target, the wrist. His dark eyes, wide with novelty of injury, narrowed into slits of pure focus. The red optic glowed, already charging another of those piercing lances. There was no time for a booyah blast, no room for a winding punch. He needed precision. He needed a scalpel, not a hammer. As the android's wrist bracer hummed into a piercing whine, Goku's own energy turned inward, condensing not into a sphere in his palms, but into two pinpricks, a furious red light at the centers of his pupils. The air around his head wavered, with heat haze mimicking one of the abilities of his brother Superman. The android fired. The lethal pencil-thin beam of white-hot energy lanced across the rooftop. But Goku didn't dodge. He moved his head a fraction, letting the beam slice the air beside his ear. In the same microsecond, the built-up energy in his eyes released. It wasn't a wild blast, but two focused azure lances of ki, thinner and faster than his usual beams. They crossed a distance with a sound like a tearing silk, then a zip, pop, crack. The first eye beam struck the center of the android's glowing crimson optic. The lens didn't just shatter, it vaporized in a small contained flash of sparks and molten composite, plunging that side of the helmet into darkness. The second beam was a fraction of a second behind. Aimed with surgical accuracy, it struck the center of the energy bracer on the android's wrist, and there was a louder, more violent crack, the sound of superheated metal meeting arcane circuitry. Arcane-like circuitry. The bracer didn't explode, it imploded, collapsing in on itself with a shower of miniature sparks before the housing blackened and smoked. Its deadly hum dying instantly. Goku let the minor eye beams fade, a wisp of smoke curling from his shoulders. He stood, left arm hanging slightly. The cauterized wound on his shoulder a stark testament, but his gaze was fixed on the android, now half blind and disarmed. The fight had entered a new and more brutal phase. The numbness from the cauterized wound burned away, replaced by a sharp electric anger that was something colder and more precise. He'd been marked, almost killed by a machine. A flicker of Vegeta's smug face or Piccolo's mocking laughter played through his mind. Even a metal toy can make you bleed. Pathetic. The android's remaining systems whirred, its body tensing for a physical assault. Now that its primary weapons were slag, it calculated 100 counterattacks in a millisecond. But Goku gave him 0 seconds. He was just there. His right hand shot out, not in a punch, but in a claw-like grab. His fingers didn't strike the chest plate, they dug, finding the seam where the red and white armor met. With a terrifying metallic shriek of rending alloy, he peeled the entire front thoracic plate backward like a lid of a tin can. Wires and synthetic muscle fibers glistening with hydraulic fluid snapped and sparked. The android staggered, its balance algorithms faltering. Goku didn't let it fall. His left hand, ignoring the searing pain in his own shoulder, hammered forward in a short, brutal uppercut. It connected on the helmet's jawline with a sickening crunch. Composite material. The helmet's mounting ring sheared. The helmet flew off, clattering across the gravel. Goku froze, his fist poised for another strike. It wasn't the smooth synthetic face of an android that stared back. It was a man's face, pale and slick with sweat, bisected by a scar. His eyes were human, wide, bloodshot, and filled with terror and surprise that was utterly vulnerably organic. Goku didn't know who he was by name, but this was Floyd Lawton, Deadshot. But his bones underneath was framed by cybernetic components, sockets, and ports drilled into the bone, wires snaking from his temples into the neck of the suit. His mouth moved, grasping for air, a wet human sound. You're not a robot? Goku said, the anger draining into a vortex of cold, sickening understanding. The red eye, the bracer, they were just accessories. The real upgrade was the man. Gero hadn't built a new android. He'd hollowed out a human and filled the space with weapons, turning a killer into a living, breathing gun. Turning a gunman into a living, breathing gun. Lois's words echoed. They're making them, hybridizing them. Goku stood over him, his own blood cooling on his shoulder. The victory tasting of oil and despair. The human face stared up at him, a grotesque sculpture of flesh, scar tissue, and gleaming cybernetics. Goku's rage, cold and precise just moments before, stuttered into a horrified confusion. This wasn't a machine to dismantle. It was a man who had been taken apart and reassembled into some type of weapon. Floyd Lawton gasped, a wet, ragged sound, his human eye bloodshot and shocked. Darted to a ruined bracer that was on his wrist, then back to Goku's face. A twisted pain smirk stretched his lips. See something you like, hero? He wheezed, his voice now his own, raw and strained without the vocator. The docks work. He doesn't build from scratch. Not if he doesn't have to. He can retrofit better base materials and a mind that already knows how to kill. Goku took a half step back, his guard lowering a fraction. Why? Why let him do that to you? The why doesn't matter. Lawton coughed, pushing himself up on one elbow with a whir of servos. The job does, and the job's clear. Test the upgrades on a high-value metahuman target. You. Luther was just conventional bait. And he could have been a bonus. A 2-for-1 if I got lucky. He tapped a finger against the side of his head where a metal met bone. He uploaded the specs. I saw what you did to Deathstroke, mate. The raw data. I knew my new energy weapons were the only play. His hand, trembling slightly, moved to his belt, not for a gun, but to a small, flat device. But you're right. I am beat. Can't punch you to pace. Can't shoot through you right now. He held up the device, a single trigger, with a blinking red light. But the job's not over. Until the contractor says it is. And my contract has a severance clause. Goku's eyes widened. What's that? Insurance, Lawton said, his smirk turning into something grim and final. My sources tell me you saved the innocent. Cute policy. He pressed the button. Beep. A deep subsonic thump vibrated through the very structure of the building far below them. Not an explosion on their level, but in its foundations. The pavilion downstairs. Lawton grunted, struggling to his feet. Lex's party of the century had C4 wired to the main support columns during a setup. Low yield, calculated, won't bring the whole tower down, but the ballroom. The balcony where all those beautiful, important people are sipping champagne and pretending that they matter. He met Goku's horrified gaze. That's coming down. 100-foot drop into a bay for most of them. Hypothermia, drowning, fall, damage, or crushing debris. Goku took a step toward him, then stopped, his head whipping toward the edge of the rooftop as the first screams, faint and terrified, began to drift up from far below. The wall of structural alarms joined them. Hey, mate, if you think they're innocent, Lawton spat, trickling from his lip. Those people down there, their money hires people like me. Their policies create the wars, the slums, and the desperate people that I grew up with. They play with their lives like chips on a table, then go home to escorts and penthouses and pretend their hands are clean. They're not innocent, mate. They're the reason the world needs people with guns. They just usually have thicker walls between them and the consequences. He stumbled backward toward the rooftop's opposite edge, where a compact single-person jetpack was magnetically clamped. Time to take my ride. Your choice, hero. You can try to stop me, or you can go play lifeguard for a bunch of billionaires who'd sell your family for a 3-point stock bump. And if I didn't say it already, I'm Deadshot, by the way. And with a final ragged salute, Lawton fell backward off the ledge. The jetpack ignited with a roar, catching him and steering him erratically into the night sky. A damaged bird fleeing the chaos he'd sown. Goku stood frozen for one agonizing second, torn between the pursuit and salvation. The screams from below decided it. With a curse of frustration that was also a vow, he turned his back on the fleeing android assassin and dove headfirst off the roof, a streak of orange aimed not at the enemy, but toward the collapsing world of the quote-unquote innocent that he had decided he'd save. The dust from the collapsing pavilion balcony hung in the air like a bitter fog. Goku moved through it as a calming orange blur. He wasn't fighting now. He was stitching the world back together, one by one. He plucked coughing, terrified socialites and politicians from twisted girders, from sinking sections of flooring, from the chilly waters of the bay itself. He set them down gently on the stable inland plaza, his movements efficient, his expression grimly focused. As the shock wore off, the gratitude began. A sobbing woman in a torn gown clutched his arm. You saved us. You were right there. A man with a bleeding forehead nodded vigorously. Lex Luthor was right. You are here, in the light, with us. Another voice filled with awe chimed in. Yeah, no mask, no secrets. Just a man doing the right thing. The words were meant as praise, but they landed on Goku like stones. Each Luthor was right felt like a twist of the knife Lex had earlier planted. He was being thanked, but his very presence was being used as a weapon against his own friends. He gave short nods, avoiding their eyes, a hollow feeling growing beneath his sternum where the android's blast had struck. The final civilian was deposited on solid ground. The wall of emergency vehicles filled the night. And then, a familiar streak of blue and red descended through the haze. Superman landed behind him, his cape settling, his eyes full of concern as he scanned Goku, the torn, dusty suit, the glaring cauterized wound. Goku, are you all right? The reports say Lex was almost assassinated. Then I heard the explosive collapse. What happened? Goku finally looked at his brother, the crowd's echoing praise fading in the background noise. He touched his injured shoulder, his brow furrowed not with pain, but with cold, tactical dread. Yeah, I'm okay, he said, his voice low so only Clark could hear. But Clark, it was all a trap. The shooter wasn't just for Lex, he was for me. He met Superman's gaze, his own eyes deadly serious, and he wasn't just a guy with a fancy gun. He was different, like Slade was, but worse. His tech pierced right through my key barrier, and he called himself Deadshot. He let the name hang in the chilled air. I think I just fought another one of the Red Ribbon's creations, and this one was built to hurt people that were like us. So yeah, man, that'll be the episode. I hope you guys liked it. You know, if you did, like, comment, subscribe. Dang, it's 40 minutes. It's a long one. Yeah, I decided to make Deadshot an android. Let me know what y'all think about that. Also, I didn't know if I wanted to go with like the Will Smith design or like, classic Deadshot. I decided to go with classic. My Australian accent is terrible, but it is what it is. So anyways, if you guys liked it, be sure you like, comment, subscribe. Once again, become a member. All that. Hype up the video. And I'll catch y'all on the next one. I've been talking too much already. Gone. Peace.